Conseil national pour la sauvegarde de la patrie rejette en bloc ces sanctions et refuse de céder à toute menace et d'où qu'elles viennent. Nous refusons toute ingérence dans les affaires intérieures du Niger et rejetons la prétention chez les uns et les autres de punir pour l'exemple le Conseil national pour la sauvegarde de la patrie et le peuple nigérien.
I don't know if you've been paying attention, but Africa just shocked the world, and it has massive implications for the United States and for Europe. Many of our Western leaders are freaking out right now. I kind of actually enjoy watching them. Victoria Nuland, who of course helped create the war in Ukraine, has gone from DEFCON 5 down to DEFCON 1 over Africa in the matter of weeks. It's an emergency, and she should be concerned because this stuff is about to hit the fan. The dominoes are starting to fall, and we'll get into the important details here in a second. But first, take a look at this map just published on Friday. These are all of the African nations that have now signed military agreements with Russia, and even a few of those in white are getting ready to partner with Russia as well. Damn, that's a lot of red. Now, we'll come back to that map in a moment, but first, this weekend we saw dramatic developments, Russian flags raised in the air throughout the continent. First to Niger, the country that started it all. Russian flags everywhere, and according to France 24 news service, the government of Niger has now signed a contract with the Russian Wagner Group for security. And they need it because the coup in Niger has entered the point of no return right now. The people rising up against France, against the United States' influence in that country. The Western powers that have controlled Niger for decades are now being pushed out. And this weekend, the military leaders now say that Niger will no longer be a European colony. And they've demanded that all French soldiers get out now, get out of here, or face the consequences. Why does the United States even have troops in this country in the first place? Well, that's a great question. So get out of here, France, and get out of here, United States. You don't belong here. Over the past few days, the United States started dropping massive amounts of military cargo right near the Niger border with its warplanes. They are getting ready to attack Niger to try to stop it all. But that threat is not stopping the people of Niger. Tens of thousands of people marching in that country this weekend, celebrating their independence and shouting no to foreign military bases, no to poverty, no to the West stealing their uranium, their phosphate, and other minerals. Get out of here now. All of the ambassadors' offices to the Niger Republic Mission Service, the United States, France, Nigeria, and Togo have all been terminated. All of their offices are now officially shut down by the Niger government. The head of the military just made this announcement. So other African nations are now showing their support for Niger and starting to say the very same thing. Get out of our country. This weekend, the people in Senegal rising up against Western colonial governments controlling their country. The CIA, MI6, and other Western intelligence services are doing whatever they can right now, spinning their wheels, trying to hold on to power in these countries with their puppet governments. The people in West Africa are fiercely anti-American imperialism, so it wasn't a surprise then to see the country of Guinea announce they are supporting Niger as well.
La République de Guinée réaffirme par ce communiqué sa vision panafricaniste en apportant sa solidarité à la population nigérienne.
This is massive, and Colonel Douglas McGregor says the people who've had their minerals stolen for years are saying enough is enough. Get out of my country.
The Africans are fed up with it. And so this is an example in Niger where a supposedly U.S.-backed government with a U.S.-trained military suddenly turned around and said, I think all of you white people need to get out of here. We've had it with you. Go away. Go, Europeans, leave.
Again, we'll get around to the uranium and gold part of this story in a moment, which is arguably the most important part of this story. But first, a story that no one's talking about is the massive pipeline that is nearly set to go online. Now, it starts in Nigeria. It flows through Niger on its way up into Europe. Chevron and the United States have already invested $13 billion into this pipeline. And guess what, guys? After the Nord Stream pipeline destruction, Chevron stepped up production to get this up and running. Hey, we'll speed this up. We'll fast track this. And now the people of Niger are saying, wait a second, why are we going to allow a pipeline to flow right through our country so Europe can have natural gas? You are doing nothing for us. You continue to steal from us. Sorry, no more pipeline. This is why Europe is terrified this morning. The United States Well, what will the West do with their puppet in Ukraine? What will the West do with Volodymyr Zelensky now that the war is over for Ukraine? Ukraine has turned into a graveyard, and reports over the past 24 hours over this weekend of Ukrainian soldiers in trenches, in bunkers, sitting next to the decomposing bodies of their comrades who've fallen days, weeks ago, because they have no one to come in and remove the bodies. That's how bad things have gotten for this graveyard in Ukraine. Our next guest says that Zelensky better get ready to be finished off by the CIA, the intelligence community. The CIA has a long track record, a very good track record of getting rid of leaders that have run out their value. And the CIA has managed to put an end to those people. Someone who knows exactly how the CIA operates is Larry Johnson, who used to work for the CIA. Has an intimate knowledge of how this unfolds. Larry, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Clayton. Good to be with you.
So your position over the past few days has been Zelensky better watch out. The CIA, the intelligence community, will do in him the way that they've done in other leaders, no?
Right. When you look at the history of the United States in dealing with these kinds of foreign conflicts, we have a very consistent pattern. You know, we're like the abusive spouse who's been married multiple times, who keep beating up our mate. So go back to Diem in Vietnam. He wound up dead. Then you get Manuel Noriega. He was kidnapped, taken prisoner. We invaded his country, brought him to the United States. Saddam Hussein, remember the photographs? He's arm in arm with Donald Rumsfeld. Hey, we're great friends.
Right.
So, the West has been praising Zelensky as the new Winston Churchill, which just, goes to underscore the level of delusion that has possessed the West. But now you're getting in all quarters, in Washington and London, and Germany, and throughout the rest of NATO, these recriminations being expressed about Ukraine's failure to press the counteroffensive, always begging for more. So this is starting to become a more common thing. So I think the next natural step, whether the CIA does it or the CIA encourages somebody to do it, I don't think Zelensky's long for the world. He's not the kind of guy that I think is going to be allowed to go off into exile where he'll be sunning himself down in Miami Beach.
So he will become, in many ways, I guess they'll sort of treat him as a martyr, or they'll take him out because he's inconvenient now, and now we want to use some other sort of puppet in Ukraine. Do you think that they've reached this sort of tipping point in Washington where those folks sitting around the CIA have said he's run out his usefulness now? Now is the time that we step in and we mobilize Plan B.
I don't think we're there quite yet because, you've had Victoria Nuland elevated to the number 2 position in State Department as the Deputy Secretary of State. You've seen no sign from Blinken or Jake Sullivan that they're willing to start pulling the plug. But within the CIA, there are elements that have been coming out talking to people like Cy Hirsch, indicating that this thing is going astray and we're not going to succeed and something needs to be done. So the once unified position that was common in Washington is now starting to unravel. And when that unraveling process starts, it has a tendency to accelerate, coupled with the fact of the complete lack of progress by Ukraine on the ground militarily, and their increasingly desperate attacks with drones that they're hitting targets that have zero military significance.
Do you think that NATO is about to throw Ukraine under the bus? Or, we already know that they've thrown Ukraine under the bus, right? They don't give a shit about Ukraine. Right. Ukraine has become a graveyard for NATO's passions and expansion. But do you think that this sort of phony friendship is now going to dissolve and NATO will fully throw Ukraine under the bus?
Well, that's the interesting thing. Ukraine, even though it was not a de jure member of NATO, it has been a de facto member of NATO since 2014. And in that capacity, Ukraine represented the second largest military force in NATO. So the experiment, let's call it the experiment of the last 18 months, they knew that they were provoking Russia into retaliating militarily. Russia did. the West calculated that Russia would fail. Russia has not. And in the process, the second largest army in NATO is being eviscerated. NATO doesn't have an answer. What can NATO do? In fact, what they've watched is all of these incredible technological weapons systems that were going to be game changers are being destroyed and are not making any difference whatsoever on the ground. So and I think, candidly, NATO doesn't know what to do, because what is it going to do? What the United Kingdom's going to mobilize its army of 75,000 guys? I mean, right. It's just we've reached the point. It's ridiculous. All NATO can do is talk tough, posture, and do nothing.
I want to get your sense of exactly how this attack on Zelensky would unfold, how the CIA will make this happen, the intelligence communities, the CIA, the MI6 will take out Zelensky. And I've heard reports that this would happen in a way where they would make it look like Russia did it. That's sort of the plan on the table right now, is that he will be taken out. They will make it look like Russia did it. He will be martyred in some sort of way as a convenient cover story. What's your sense of how this will unfold?
Well, the most likely one is an explosion in his headquarters that can then be attributed to a Russian missile that Russia did kill him. But I think that the key actors in this are going to be the military, Zelensky, the head of the Ukrainian military, because they're under enormous political pressure to deploy these troops, and Zelensky, for all of his faults, is still a military man, and I think it has to absolutely horrify him with the casualties that they're seeing. And you mentioned that report earlier, the Ukrainian troops sharing bunkers with corpses. I don't know if you've seen the image, but the image is just horrific. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, can you imagine sitting there next to one of your fallen comrades from 2 weeks ago, whose body has been decomposing next to you while you're waiting to see whether or not you're going to survive?
Yeah, that type of death has a very tangible presence, as far as it affects all of your senses, and it's just and yet here these guys are. So I mean, it shows you the depths to which they've fallen. And Ukraine now, they don't have any viable path forward. They can throw as many men as they want at these defensive lines the Russians have erected, but they have no way of breaking through because they lack the essentials of air power, mobile artillery, etc.
I want to play now a clip for our audience and get your take on this, Larry. This is a remarkable clip from the man who's in charge of this entire theater for NATO and for the United States, and basically admitting that Russia hasn't been hindered at all in this operation. Undersea capabilities, air capabilities, they haven't been degraded at all. So all of what we've been hearing from the West has been an utter lie. Watch it right from the horse's mouth.
First of all, sir, if I could, I'd like to underline your comment about the specificity of the degradation of the Russian forces. Much of the Russian military has not been affected negatively by this conflict. One of those forces is their undersea forces. It's hard to talk in public, as you well know, sir, about undersea warfare and our efforts in that regard. But I can say that the Russians are more active than we've seen them in years, and their patrols into the Atlantic and throughout the Atlantic are at a high level. Most of the time, at a higher level than we've seen in years. And this is, as you pointed out, despite all of the efforts that they're undertaking.
So, Larry, he once again doubled down on this. This is, of course, testimony at the House Oversight Committee on specifically what's going on with Russian forces. And we've been hearing from the West. But you hear, I mean, NATO is absolutely losing this, and Russia has not been degraded at all.